My name is Tiago Bill. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Open Cosmos. Hope you can hear me well. So I'm here to talk about space, right? And before I do that, just to introduce myself, so that you understand my biases, because I'm going to talk a lot about space. So I'm an aerospace engineer by training. I'm an entrepreneur by heart. I've spent more than 15 years in the aerospace industry, most of it spent here in the country developing Portuguese capabilities towards actually manufacturing, launching, and operating satellites from space. So it's a topic I'm very dear. I've been with Open Cosmos for just 5 months because my previous company, Connected, an IoT connectivity company, was recently acquired by Open Cosmos. I'm going to tell you everything about Open Cosmos, but let's start with why space. Please note that I'll speak a little bit faster than usual because we are way behind schedule, so I was asked to speed up. In any case, you are welcome to come to me after the talk. Happy to answer your questions, happy to discuss whatever you would like to. So why space? So this is how it looked like when we looked back to the Earth 50 years ago. This is the first photograph of the whole Earth taken from space, right? It was beautiful, of course, but that's not how it looks like today. Today it looks something like this. Obviously, this is an exaggerated image, but right now we have more than 12,000 active satellites in orbit. And just to put a perspective, more than 65% of those satellites do not belong to a country, do not belong to a federation of countries, belong to a company, which is, SpaceX and Starlink. That's 65% of the all fleet of satellites we have in orbit. Out of the remaining 35, more than 90% belong to 5 countries: the US, China, Russia, India, and then let's put Europe as a whole because we do have the European Space Agency. Now, why is this and why does this matter in a conference like the one we are having today? We are talking about the digital, where we are talking about infrastructure, where we are talking about sovereignty, the progress, the AI advent, and so on and so forth. It matters because space gives us a unique vantage point to understand and to connect the world. So if you don't have access to space infrastructure as a country, if you don't have access to space infrastructure as a government, in terms of communicating your data, also in terms of getting data from the ground, you are not achieving your full potential, right? And I would dare say that besides the obvious, which is Starlink and SpaceX and communications, what we do with space tech influences us every single day. All of us most probably have already used space technology this morning while coming here. If we used Waze or Google Maps, navigating these days without space technology is pretty much impossible. Forecasting the weather, I'll not judge. Most of the times I think they still get it wrong, but still that's done with space technology. But also collecting Earth observation, collecting imagery from the Earth. Because it's with this imagery, either high resolution or very high resolution data, that we can understand what's happening here on the ground and that we can actually tackle global challenges. And by global challenges, I'm talking everything from the wildfires that every single year impact us here in Portugal, Greece, Spain, Italy, but also the folks in the US and California. From space, we can predict, foresee, monitor, and help tackle down the fires. But also from space, we can understand what's happening with climate change. We can monitor the landslides. We can understand and foresee and predict volcano eruption. So there is a lot of data that we can collect from space. So I would dare say that the only truly global perspective is really from up there. And there's many things we can do with space data. We can monitor deforestation, we can monitor our oceans, we can surveil our shores, we can make sure that nothing illegal is happening in our exclusive economic zones, in our waters, but we can also measure air quality, we can also measure the ocean's acidification, and obviously we can connect remote communities at large, right? So we are basically kind of layering up the new fiber optics up there. That's kind of where we are. So what's the problem? I kind of stated the obvious. Space is important, right? So most of you probably already got this. That's not why I'm here. The problem is that this is technology that's still only accessible to a few nations, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? And even though there's a lot of assets going to space, they belong to the same nations or corporates in this case, and others are lagging behind. And they are lagging behind because it's still expensive to get to space. It's still expensive to operate satellites. It's still a very fragmented market. It's still considered kind of dual use / defense technology. So it's slow, it's expensive, it's fragmented, it's difficult for small nations. And I know what I'm talking about because I'm Portuguese, and in 30-ish years, we launched 4 satellites, and the last 3 were in the last 2 years, right? So it's hard for a small nation to actually have access to this key technology. So now is the point. I'm the chief revenue officer at the company. At some point, I had to talk about the company and what we do. So now is the sales part of it, right? Jokes aside, what we do, and that's the concept behind my keynote, is we came up with a concept of a federated constellation, a mutualized federated constellation, right? Where we call it the Open Constellation. And we started with the Earth observation component. And the concept is very simple. Instead of putting up the effort, the cost, the risk, the money to launch, a couple of satellites to space for a few $100 million, why not contribute for something larger? Why not put resources together? As long as we can ensure the sovereignty of the data, as long as we can ensure, that each country will still have control under the assets over its jurisdiction. And then we put together, we are a verticalized company. We put together the infrastructure bits. So we develop satellites all the way from 20 kilogram satellites. I always like to do this parallelism, like microwave size, to give you an idea, to 500 kilo platforms. These are like washing machine size, right? So that you have a sense of what I'm talking about. So we manufacture satellites, we launch satellites, we operate the satellites, and then we provide, data, Earth observation data. And to give you a sense, these data can go all the way to 50 centimeters per pixel. So I cannot identify a person, but these days you can already, spot a car very easily, right? But then also the connectivity part. And this is a new business vertical for the company because now we are also providing IoT connectivity. And to give you an example, so if you are monitoring, here the exclusive economic zone from Portugal is huge. There's a very small country, right? But a huge Atlantic area under the sovereignty of the country. So we can do it with airplanes, which is expensive. We can do it with ships, which is expensive. But we can also do it from space, right? By adding then, in situ, like buoys or drifting buoys or drones on the water that can also send data, like if they detect something, through the satellites that will overlay the imagery with the data collected on the ground. So what's the concept? And where are we? Because we are a little bit beyond the concept. We are already operationalizing it. So in simple terms, if I, as a country, satellites go to orbit, right? And when they are in low Earth orbit, which is kind of the most crowded orbits these days, around 600 to 1,000 kilometers, every 90 minutes, the Earth goes around and the satellite goes around. So around 14, 15 times per day, I go around, the satellite goes around the Earth, right? If I have one satellite in space, this satellite will pass over a country every 1 to 2 days, right? The more satellites I have in space, if they are well spread and well planned, the higher the revisit, which means the higher the data I can acquire. So as a country, and if I'm the Portuguese government, I'm interested on data mostly out of Portugal. So if I send one satellite to space, and 98% of the time is over another region of the globe, I'm kind of underusing the asset. Sure, I want to make sure that I control the asset, that I task it what I want, that the data goes in my territory, that no one else has access to it. But 95% of the time, it's kind of underused, right? So the concept is simple. If you contribute towards the Open Constellation as a country, and right now we have already 10 satellites in space, 34 being launched in the next couple of years, what happens is you contribute with what you can. So you contribute with one satellite, with two satellites, with three satellites. And the way it works is that you will get 3 times the amount of data that you would with these satellites. So when you contribute with these satellites, you will have priority over your region. So you can always task those satellites as if they were your own. You can always get the data as you wish, under your territory, under your country. And for everyone else, for the other countries, they won't know which data you acquired, they won't know what you tasked, you have control over your territory. When the satellites go to other territories, well, it's mutual beneficial. You know, if I put 3 and you put 3 and the other one puts 3, now we have 9, which means that instead of getting data once a week, we are getting data twice a day. If we have 30, maybe we can get data once an hour, right? So as the members grow, the amount of data grows, and there is a sweet spot, which is we as a company, as a neutral company that makes sure that the satellites are healthy, that they operate, that they are functional, right? We take care of all of that. We as a company can really bring the price of the capex of those satellites down, because we can also have the rights to sell these data and have a revenue share with these countries. So if you are a private enterprise and you don't want to own satellites, but you do want to have access to data, you know, maybe you don't want to contribute to the constellation, but you would like to get still the data, so you can go online, you can go to the Data Cosmos platform, and you can acquire the data, right? Then for the governments and the institutions, it's very simple. So they have sovereign rights over their territory. If they want, they can have ground stations on their territory to task the satellites and to receive the data, which means that the data doesn't need to go on the internet, doesn't need to go in any other country, right? It can stay in the country. You go online, you see when the satellite is passing above your country, you can task the satellite, you can ask for data, you can ask it to collect data from buoys, whatever you would like, right? Same for connectivity. Right now, we're seeing a huge push from countries on sovereign connectivity. We all know what happened in Ukraine. You know, when Starlink pulled the plug, there was no European alternative. There was no way we could keep on ensuring that those people out there had connectivity to defend themselves, because we were fully dependent on a foreign country, or on a foreign partner. I would dare say on a foreign millionaire that can do whatever he wants. So countries, and we have seen it in France, we have seen it in Germany, we are now seeing the push in Spain, are asking us, can we do the same with telecommunications, right? I just want to make sure that I got some throughput capacity, but I don't need, you know, I don't need 5,000 satellites up there, because as a country, I'll not be able to use all of that. So we are going from the Earth observation side now towards the telecommunications. So why does it matter, and why am I talking about space and mutualized infrastructure and open constellation, you know, in a forum where we are discussing the convergence of the Atlantic? Well, it matters because most of the smaller countries around the Atlantic still have nearly no access to this type of technology. And yes, we now have Spain, Portugal, the UK, we now have Greece contributing towards it, but as this is a new initiative, right, I really want to, you know, raise awareness to it. And there's an important aspect of it, or 4 benefits that I would like to wrap up. So the first one is, even if you have never built a satellite before, the way the company works is we go to the country, we create a local company, we hire locally, and we manufacture, we design, we launch and operate the satellites that the country is contributing in the country. So right now we have facilities in Greece where we have 40 people, here in Portugal where we have 40 people, in Spain where we have around 80 people, so the UK, right? And because we want to keep the sovereign angle, right? If the satellites are manufactured in the UK and then brought to, I don't know, Portugal, sure, we are partners and allies, but maybe the government or defense will say, yeah, you might have a backdoor, or the IP still belongs to someone else. So this is a very important aspect, which is the sovereign control, right? On the operations, on the manufacturing, on the design, on the launch, across the life cycle of the assets in space. Another important aspect is that even though it's already faster to build satellites than it was 20 years ago, but still, from designing, manufacturing to launch and operating a satellite, there's still at least 12 to 18 months. So you as a country, you as a government, you as an enterprise don't need to wait to get access to data from the constellation, from the federated constellation, until you actually have your satellites flying up there. You can already do it from day one once you become a member. Then obviously it's very cost efficient because you are paying way less than what you are actually getting in terms of service. And it's also scalable and future-proof because as more countries, as more governments, and now we are seeing, I cannot yet announce it, but on the 10th of November, we'll be launching 2 satellites. And for the first time, we have an enterprise, a private enterprise, contributing to the Open Constellation, right? And the reason is simple. If you think about, we are in the intelligence era, right? And I would say there's 3 blocks to it on AI, right? So there is the models, the LLMs, the AI, that's what we are seeing these days with ChatGPT and so on and so forth. There is the hardware, the computational power to be able to run these strong models. But then there's one thing, which is data, right? And to get data, we are getting a lot of data from space. And this is raw data, right? This is how we're talking always about digital twins, but digital twins is as good as the input data. So we'll always need the raw data. Countries need the raw data, right? Governments need the raw data, and the private sector will ever more need the raw data to be able to provide new businesses. So it doesn't matter if it's to monitor wildfires. It really doesn't matter if it's for urban planning, if it's just to see if you build a pool in your backyard and you are not paying taxes over it. Yes, serious. This is a real use case and business model, and many governments are now getting literally millions in taxes because they are using AI with images from space to detect illegal pools, right? So it doesn't matter if you are checking how your natural resources are being exploited from space. And it really doesn't matter if you just want to understand how is climate change impacting the glaciers. All of this can be done from space, just as it can be the monitoring of the ocean from a scientific perspective, but also from a sovereign perspective. Who is in my waters that shouldn't be? And the power to be able to communicate this data in real time is something that's unique. My last slide is about the company, because obviously I spoke a lot of what is being done, but I would just like to bring some credibility to it. As a space company, we have been around for a decade. We have more than 200 people right now. Company was born in the UK, supported by UK government, Greek government, Spanish government, Portuguese government, and the European Space Agency. 100% success rate to orbit. That's not luck. We have managed that every single one of the satellites that we launched has been functioning and operational. Right now, 34 satellites under delivery. Those are real contracts, they are not promises. Company raised very few and is actually profitable for the last 4 years, which is kind of news in the space sector because it's not easy for a company to be profitable. So this is the fleet. If some of you around the room want to know more about it, want to know how you could tap into this technology, I want to know how you could, access this technology at a not prohibitive cost, I would be happy to discuss further. I've reached the end of my time. So if you want to know more about how can satellites help understand and connect the world, it would be a privilege for me to talk with you guys. Thank you so much for your time here today.